Every Tuesday by 6:45 a.m., Michael was already there. The blue polo shirt was always pressed, the khaki work pants creased just right, clipboard tucked under one arm. Quiet, slow steps. Not slow like tired, slow like deliberate. He never rushed, never broke stride, never made a show of effort. Just moved from the clubhouse steps to the mailbox curb, inspecting cracks and warps, tapping gently on exposed wood with his knuckles like he was listening to something the rest of them couldn't hear. "Morning, Mike," called Barbara from Unit 14, waving a yogurt spoon in his direction. He smiled politely, lifted 2 fingers from the clipboard. She didn't know his real name was Michael A. Livingston, didn't know he used to be an attorney, didn't know he'd drafted the original covenant that governed the subdivision. Didn't need them to know, not yet. Mike the maintenance man is what they called him on the board minutes. The HOA president, Mr. Carver, once joked that he must live in the janitor's closet behind the pool. The laughter that followed was the polite, suburban kind. Short, a little too loud and eager to move on. Michael had written down every word. That morning, a storm had blown out the signage by the tennis court. Cheap vinyl letters peeled back and flapped in the wind like loose skin. Michael bent down, checked the metal base. Rusted, improperly anchored. He took a photo, clipped it to the back of his report. From the porch of Unit 7, Mrs. Delaney watched with a familiar tightness in her mouth. She'd once asked if he was authorized to walk near her rose bushes. He hadn't answered, just moved on. By 9 p.m. the board had already left 2 voicemails. Voicemail 1. "Mike, can you get someone to power wash the back entry sign? HOA meeting tonight. We want it to look nice for the new buyers." Voicemail 2. "Also, the drain near Lot 6 is clogged." Again. "Not sure what's going on. Maybe snakes. Bring gloves." He pressed delete on both, not out of disrespect, just protocol. He didn't work for the HOA. They never signed a contract. They'd just gotten used to asking, and he'd gotten used to nodding, for now. At 6:03 p.m., he stood quietly at the back of the community clubhouse while the HOA meeting started. Plastic folding chairs. A pitcher of lemon water, one too many printed agendas with Carver's name bolded at the top. "Let's keep this brief," Carver barked. "We've got a budget vote, landscaping complaints, and one small item regarding unauthorized access to private property." Michael tilted his head. The item was marked 6D trespassing complaint, unidentified male. Carver continued, "We've had reports of a man wandering the grounds without proper clearance. Near units near the clubhouse, potential liability. I move that we vote to restrict access moving forward, unless formally approved." Someone seconded it. Someone laughed and said, "It's probably just Mike again." Carver leaned back. "Yeah. What's that guy's last name anyway?" Michael didn't speak. He never did, not in these meetings. Not until he had to. Instead, he reached into his leather briefcase, and the one no one ever noticed, pulled out the original 1983 plat deed, set it flat on the table in front of him. He didn't say a word. Not yet. The document sat there like it. Didn't belong. Not because it was out of place, but because no one knew what to do with it. A faded cream parchment, faint watermark still visible under the fluorescence, corners curled just slightly from age. Michael didn't slide it toward anyone, didn't announce its presence, just laid it down with 2 fingers and returned to stillness. Mike?" Carver squinted. "What's this?" No answer. He waited, the room now a little too quiet. Someone cleared their throat. A chair creaked. Carver picked up the paper with a huff, half joking. "Is this your resume?" But as he scanned it, his smirk faltered. It wasn't a resume. It wasn't a flyer. It was the original land. Covenant for the Silver Oaks Residential Association. With a name stamped clearly at the bottom, Michael A. Livingston, Esquires, Legal Counsel for Livingston Family Holdings Trust, and right beneath it, in elegant serif type, Landowner and Permanent Trustee, Silver Oak Subdivision, Tract BF, Carver. Blinked once, then again slower. Wait, what is this? Is this real? The Vice President, Tonya, leaned over to look. Is this saying you're... Michael spoke for the first time all night. It's saying the land you're sitting on and the clubhouse, the pool, the lots east of Willow Run were leased for 99 years, on condition of residential compliance and maintenance. His voice wasn't loud, wasn't dramatic. Just clear, measured, like someone who'd read more contracts than he'd signed. Carver's face had shifted. The humor was gone now. So, what are you saying, Mike? Michael, he corrected gently. And I'm saying your board has spent the last 6 years issuing citations for fence paint, mailbox flowers and garden stones, while the foundation under your own signage is rotting. He paused, gaze sweeping the room. You enforce the rules, but you never read the terms. Tonya looked pale. So what does this mean? Michael set another document down, a recent photo. The tennis court sign, rusted, bent, one corner collapsed. This means Clause 14C has been violated. Gross neglect of common grounds, which gives the trustee and me temporary oversight to assess the condition of all shared spaces. He said it calmly, like it was obvious. Carver's jaw tightened. You can't just show up and take over. Michael looked at him. I've been showing up for 3 years quietly every Tuesday. And then he said something softer, almost like an afterthought. My father laid this pavement, poured it by hand with 3 men and a cement mixer that broke halfway through. He built this subdivision when banks wouldn't loan to black contractors, called it Silver Oaks, because he thought the name might make the city board take him seriously. The silence in the room deepened. They never did, Michael said, but he did it anyway. And I've spent the last decade making sure they can't undo what he left behind. A woman from the back raised her hand slowly. So you're not a maintenance guy? He turned to her with the trace of a smile. No, ma'am. I just maintain the legacy. Carver didn't know where to look. His mouth opened twice, closed both times. His usual trick, leaning forward, raising his voice, failed him. Something about Michael's stillness made all that posturing feel like shadowboxing. Okay, he finally said, dragging a breath. Let's not overcomplicate this, Tonya whispered. But this says he owns the land. We own our homes, he snapped, louder than intended. Michael didn't flinch. You own your structures, he said. Your homes, your walls, your paint. But the sidewalks, the greenbelt, the clubhouse, the soil beneath those fences you love to measure. Those were leased, long before any of you moved in. He tapped a line on the document. My grandfather signed the original agreement in 1983. When the HOA was created in 96, it became a cohabitation arrangement. You govern aesthetics. I oversee land use. That's the agreement. A beat. Then another. Carver reached for control. Again, well, we've had a property management company reviewing all our filings. I'm sure if this were valid, they'd have flagged it. Michael raised one brow. The company you hired 6 months ago, after firing the last one for not being aggressive enough on lawn fines? Carver's ears reddened. That's hearsay? No, Michael replied. That was in your January minutes. Tonya sat straighter. Wait, you read our minutes? I archived them, Michael said simply, as part of trustee duties. Another silence. He let it stretch, let it breathe. He'd learned that in court. The silence always hurt the one who spoke too quickly. You could have said something. Carver muttered. Michael glanced at him. You weren't listening. His eyes didn't accuse, they just stated. I've submitted 7 written reports. All of them documented structural neglect, drainage, foundation cracks, clubhouse mold. You filed 4 of them under miscellaneous complaints and labeled the last one unsolicited. He pulled out the most recent one, paper-clipped and tabbed. Page 3, community signage post at risk of collapse. 2 weeks later, collapse. Tonya's voice had gone soft. Why didn't you just push harder? Michael looked around the room. There were 11 board members, 9 white, 2 vaguely apologetic. Not one had ever asked who he was. I don't push, he said. I preserve. Then he walked to the whiteboard, took a marker, and wrote just 2 words. Clause 14C, Clause 17, then he stepped aside. Clause 14C, he said, gives me oversight if neglect of shared infrastructure occurs. Clause 17A grants me right to convene an emergency audit of board operations. Carver stood up. This is ridiculous. Nobody voted for you. Michael looked at him, quiet and level. You don't vote for the ground, he said. You just build on it. From the back someone clapped once. It wasn't sarcastic, it wasn't loud, it was just acknowledgement. By the time the meeting ended, no one was laughing anymore. Carver had tried to pivot, to reassert control by calling for a closed executive session, but Michael had calmly reminded them that under Clause 17A, once a trustee invoked an emergency audit, all HOA records became temporarily open to land oversight. No one on the board had ever read the full covenant. Tonya found herself flipping through it now, like a student who realized the final was today. Her eyes moved fast, lips silently mouthing the words. The rest of the board just sat frozen, the stack of meeting agendas still warm from the copier. 3 days later, Michael showed up with a clipboard again, only this time he wasn't alone. A woman in jeans and a linen shirt followed beside him, carrying a tablet. Her pace matched his, quiet, measured, observant. She paused occasionally to photograph sidewalk cracks, tilt her head towards sagging gutters, log time-stamped notes. Barbara from Unit 14 peeked through her blinds and whispered into the phone, "He's got someone with him now." That afternoon, every resident received a soft blue envelope in the mail, not from the HOA, but from Livingston Trust Holdings. Inside, a letter. Dear homeowner, in accordance with the original Silver Oaks land lease, a trustee audit of shared community property is underway. No action is required from you at this time. We thank you for your continued care of this neighborhood, which carries the legacy of many whose names are not carved on the signs, but are written in the soil beneath your feet. Respectfully, Michael A. Livingston, trustee, Livingston Family Holdings Carver, called an emergency meeting of his own. Only 2 board members showed up. One of them, a gray-haired man named Stan, had once tried to fine a neighbor $50 for improperly stored gardening tools. Now he just looked tired. We should have asked more questions when he showed up every week, he muttered. Carver paced. I don't understand how someone just walks in with old paper and takes over, he snapped. This is America. You don't just sneak into power. Stan looked up. He didn't sneak. You just didn't look. Meanwhile, Michael sat in the clubhouse. Not at the folding chairs, but at the long oak table tucked behind the old event calendar. The table his father built from leftover lumber. The one most people thought was decorative. He laid out maps, blueprints, repair estimates from certified inspectors. He didn't intend to punish. He intended to restore. At dusk, he walked past the tennis courts again. This time, a boy, maybe 12, looked up from his bike and asked, "Hey, are you like the guy in charge now?" Michael smiled. "Not exactly, but they're listening to you now, right?" Michael bent slightly, met his eyes. "They're hearing me," he said. "The listening part takes time." On Saturday morning, Michael walked the East Trail before sunrise. The air was damp with dew, and the gravel path still bore the faint indentations of someone's jogging shoes from the night before. He moved quietly, head slightly bowed, like he was listening to the trees, the way his father used to. When he reached the bend near the pond, he paused, bent down, ran his fingers across the low stone marker half covered by weeds, brushed the soil away. There it was, LFH, 1983. He stood up, eyes steady on the shallow water, remembering. Back at the clubhouse, Carver's voice had found its edge again. He stood near the front entrance as residents trickled in for what the HOA now called a clarification meeting. A few people gave him weak nods. Most avoided his gaze. When Michael entered, Carver gestured toward the table like nothing had happened. "We'd love your input this time around," he said too quickly. "We've always welcomed collaboration, of course." Michael took his seat without reply. He placed a small folder on the table, opened it with care. Inside, a list of all deferred. Maintenance requests since 2019, copies of all non-actionable resident complaints, photos of mold along the clubhouse foundation, and a final note: review complete. Emergency oversight period to continue 60 more days. Carver leaned in. "I don't think that's necessary." Tonya spoke before Michael did. "It is," she said firmly. "I've looked through everything. We were too focused on mailbox flags and fence colors. We missed the actual damage." She turned to Michael. "I didn't know about your family or the lease or any of this." Michael nodded once. "Most don't." There was no anger in his voice, just a kind of tired truth. The kind you carry long enough it stops needing permission to exist. That evening, a few neighbors stopped him while he was checking the irrigation near the flower beds. A woman from Unit 9 brought him lemonade, said her dad was a contractor too. A man from Unit 22 asked if he could help repaint the bench Michael had mentioned in his report. Even Barbara from Unit 14 waved him over, holding out a small Ziploc bag. "I baked shortbread," she said, almost sheepishly. "My grandma used to make 'em when she wanted to say sorry without saying it." Michael smiled. "Took one." "Tell your grandma thank you." Later, alone in the quiet, he updated the inspection report. The clubhouse needs foundational repair. The back fence, stable. Community response, evolving. He closed the folder, ran his hand across the cover. Under his breath, "To no one at all," he murmured, still holding. By the following week something had shifted. Not loudly, not with fanfare, but in the way people paused before speaking, in how Carver no longer barked instructions, in how residents started sweeping the sidewalks near their lots without being asked, in how they made eye contact. Tonya had even ordered a new plaque for the clubhouse entry. It wasn't big, wasn't showy, just brass, clean, and quiet. "This land rests on the foundation of those who came before. May we walk it with care." She didn't ask for approval, just handed Michael the proof before she submitted the order. He nodded once. That was enough. The woman who walked beside him every Tuesday, her name was Ava, returned with a full report that morning. Structural integrity for the eastern retaining wall, deterioration notes, drainage summaries. It was the kind of report most HOA boards never commissioned, the kind that could prevent the quiet disasters people only noticed once insurance got involved. Michael reviewed it silently, pen tapping once, twice, then underlining a single phrase, "settling near the garden plots." "Could be runoff," Ava offered, "or a broken sprinkler line beneath. I'll check it tomorrow. You want me to call a crew?" "No," he said. "This one's mine." That afternoon, Carver caught him outside the mailbox cluster. The older man had taken to walking slower lately, as if unsure of how to carry himself now that people saw through him. Or maybe it was just the weight of being out of control for the first time. "Listen," he started, hands in his pockets. "I might have been hasty before. I didn't know who you were." Michael didn't look up from his clipboard. "You still don't." Carver shifted. "I mean, not personally, not really. But look, I get it now. You're trying to help." Michael raised his eyes, calm and steady. "I wasn't trying, I was helping. You just didn't see it." A long pause. You know, Carver muttered, almost to himself. I used to think it was about rules. Consistency. Paint colors, noise ordinances, dog leashes. I thought that's what kept a place together. It isn't, Michael said. What keeps a place together is history and the people willing to protect it. Carver didn't have an answer, so Michael nodded once and walked away. Later that evening, a knock came at Michael's door. He opened it to find a small group of residents holding tools, gloves, and paint cans. Thought you could use some help with that retaining wall, one said. A younger woman stepped forward. Also, my dad used to say a good neighborhood doesn't start with bylaws. It starts with someone checking on the sidewalk before anyone trips. Michael nodded. Then let's fix the sidewalk. They met at 7:15 a.m. sharp. No one announced it. No HOA notice was sent. But somehow a dozen neighbors showed up. Jeans, old shirts, gloves, a few with coffees still steaming in their hands. Some didn't say much. They just watched Michael quietly dig into the earth near the garden plots, then stepped in beside him without being asked. Even Barbara from Unit 14 brought her husband, and he held the wheelbarrow like he was waiting for a reason. They dug past shallow roots, cleared. Debris rerouted the cracked sprinkler line. The youngest boy there, probably no older than 10, held the flashlight when it got cloudy, never blinking, just watching the way Michael worked with purpose and memory. Who taught you this? He asked, voice hushed like it might break the air. Michael looked up, brushing dirt from his hands. My father and his father. Before codes and ordinances and fines, they just built what they could with what they had. The boy nodded like it made perfect sense. Because it did. By noon, the retaining wall had been reseated and reinforced, the drainage fixed, the soil tamped back into place with care, not rush. Carver watched from a distance, not leading. Just learning how to watch without needing to control it. A few residents brought out folding chairs and lemonade pitchers. One woman made sandwiches. No one called it a celebration, but that's what it felt like. A kind of quiet ceremony. Michael sat on the edge of the new wall, clipboard balanced on one knee. Ava passed him an envelope, final audit documents ready for review. You're almost done, she said. I never planned to finish, he said. Just wanted to leave it better. That night, the board received his last formal note for the month. To the HOA Board Emergency Oversight concludes July the 1st. Enclosed, you'll find suggested vendors, long-term maintenance plans, and a revised resident rights guide based on the original 1983 covenant. I trust you'll read it this time. Yours, Michael A. Livingston, Escuna Trustee, Livingston Family Holdings. He didn't ask for applause, or a seat, or a vote. He already had what he came for. A community remembering what it had forgotten. A name spoken not with suspicion, but with care. A piece of ground finally honored for what it meant, not just what it was worth. The morning of July 1st came quiet. No fanfare, no ribbon cutting, just birdsong brushing against window panes and the low hum of sprinklers running properly for once. The clubhouse lights flicked on at exactly 8:00 a.m. Not because anyone ordered it, but because the new timer system Michael had installed did what it was supposed to do. Order didn't need loud hands, just steady ones. Michael arrived before the mail truck, parked in the usual spot, the old pickup truck still carrying dust from the hardware store lot. He didn't carry a clipboard this time, just a folded chair and a thermos. He sat near the tennis courts where the grass finally grew even and the new signage gleamed beneath soft morning sun. Barbara waved from her front step, hesitant but sincere. Tonya stopped on her jog to ask about the new vendor spreadsheet. Carver walked by, gave a small nod. Nothing more, but it was different now. The kind of nod that says, I was wrong and I know it. Michael didn't need more than that. At 10:42 a.m. he opened his thermos and poured 1 cup of coffee. He took the other cup, emptied, and placed it gently beside him on the grass. "Miss you, Pop," he murmured. "It's holding now." The breeze stirred. At the next HOA meeting, Michael didn't attend. He didn't need to. The board opened with a new tradition, reading a section of the original covenant aloud. One paragraph, every meeting, just so no one forgot again. Weeks later, a new family moved into Unit 6, young couple, 2 daughters. The older girl waved at Michael as he passed. "Hey, mister, are you the guy who takes care of everything?" He paused, thought of the deeds, the soil, the sweat, the silence. "No," he said softly. "I'm just the guy who remembers who did." She smiled, not quite understanding, but somehow still knowing. He tipped his cap and walked on. And that was the end of it. No grand reveal, no revenge. Just truth laid bare, like foundation. Quiet, permanent, and seen. Not just the man who worked the grounds, but the one who owned the roots.